Welcome back to the 21st episode of Absolutely Fabulous. Today we're going to be talking about two separate articles, very different in nature. We are talking more than 2 million of the budget allocated to the sheep industry to transition away from live export has gone to global media campaigns for advertising. And we're also going to be talking about Landcare groups are tightly controlled, holding back the next generation and failing to prepare future stewards for success.
Hi, welcome to Absolutely Fabulous. My name is Gillian Fennell, also known as Station Mum 101. I love everything about agriculture, especially the people and especially communicating about what makes Australian ag so special.
And I'm Katja Williams, a beef, cattle and cropping farmer, and I love all things ag, and I'm also known as the ultimate farm wife. Together, we are Absolutely Fabulous, and we are talking all things agriculture beyond the headlines.
And we can't wait to give our opinion to you, and we hope you enjoy it.
So let's get into today's episode. But before we jump into those, let's do a bit of chit chat. Gillian, what are you up to?
Hi, how you going, Katja? And for those of you who may be watching on YouTube, I am not in jail. I am just in a motel room in Alice Springs. So very plain, boring background. You can't read the spines of my books or look at my art today. And I didn't want to run the risk of putting up a nice background like Katja's got because, again, Alice Springs, Telstra, don't know if the bandwidth will carry that. So it's just me and a plain white background. So that's where I am. And what have you been up to, Katja? Oh, you've got baby there somewhere hiding in the corner.
I have. I've got baby hiding behind my background. She's sitting here. So if you hear some talking and bits and pieces, that's her. So this week was really busy. We had our first bull show for the year. So we took 3 bulls, a cow and a calf across to the Binaway show, which was fantastic. They always do really well there. It's a really nice show. Lots of great people, and they are the bulls that we'll be taking to the Sydney Royal, as well as our heifer team. But we didn't take our heifer team this weekend. So that was good. I took the kids to Lego World because it was visiting Dubbo. I think it's called Bricks, but the kids call it Lego World, so that's the title that we go by. That was really good. Lots of really impressive Lego structures, and they had an absolute ball. I also stopped in at the Mandarin cheese shop on the way through, which is one of my favorite cheese shops in this area. So if you're traveling through Mandarin, make sure you stop at the cheese shop.
I do like a bit of cheese, except goat's cheese. I find that goat's cheese tastes the way that a billy goat smells, and I just can't tolerate it. But yeah, I do enjoy cheese actually. So maybe at the conference we can have a nice cheese platter, some nice charcuterie.
I have organised it.
Excellent.
So absolutely on the same thought train for that. So let's jump into episode one. Let's jump into topic 1. Gillian, I know you'll have a lot to say about the live export and where this budget has got the
been
costs.
frittered away, perhaps spent needlessly. I think this is a bit, and this is another one of these PR marketing pieces. They've taken the money out of this transition budget, which again, so that's $2 million that now won't be spent on supporting rural communities or supporting mental health of farmers who might be struggling, or providing economic resources and research to people who may want to choose to transition out of the live X trade and diversify their operations. Because it is just another major operation in covering government arses and demonstrating to the urban audiences about how good they are. And I say this because I have heard these ads about transitioning out of the live sheep trade on inner city urban radio stations in Adelaide. Now, South Australia producers will be deeply affected and already are deeply affected by the announcement about the shutdown of the live export trade, because then, sheep have nowhere else to go. So they're coming into South Australia and pushing our prices down and all of those sorts of things. And there'll be other effects in the future. Not a lot of people in inner city Adelaide have sheep or are involved in the live export trade. So I believe, and I think I'm pretty right on this one because I usually am when it comes to the motivations of government, that this is just an exercise in demonstrating to urban voters, one, that they are maintaining their commitment that they made to minor parties, the Greens and the Animal Justice Party, that they are proceeding to shut down the trade. They're letting urban voters know that they're so generous because they're giving these poor dumb farmers so many millions of dollars to help them step away from this trade that is abhorrent and evil and everything else, because a lot of people don't understand. And so when farmers try to raise their plight and say this package isn't sufficient, this won't meet our needs, members of the community are still going to really suffer, we won't be able to carry on, the urban voters will say, but hang on, I've been hearing on the radio about how many millions of dollars you people have been getting. You're just greedy, whinging farmers. And I know I'm not wrong on this because it's just got government and politician written all over it. And quite frankly, to take $2 million out of a package that is supposed to be helping people and spending it on advertising to shore up your own political position and to downplay the effects that this decision is having on rural communities is despicable. So yeah, that's what I believe is happening. I'd love for someone to tell me to wrong, especially come and tell me on social media I'm wrong, because I would love to have that discussion in public. That would be great, be marvelous. Please do. If you're in the comms team for the Labor Party, and I don't blame Department of Agriculture for this because you're just doing what you're told by the higher ups. If you're in the comms team from the Labor Party, please come and tell me that, because I will absolutely love to have that discussion in public. That'll be great.
And a discussion well had that needs to be aired. And that's why we're talking about this in today's episode, because a lot of people will look at that and go, that's a lot of money to be spending elsewhere. And who gets to decide that part of the budget is spent on that? Because if it is meant to be for the farmers and it is meant to be for the smooth transition, who's making those decisions, Gillian? Because it doesn't sound like it's farmer-based or community-based.
That's a good question, Katja. I would also like to know who approved that budget line, because obviously it had to be approved by somebody, because it doesn't withstand the pub test, that particular decision, because we have the transition package and hello darling, hello gorgeous. We've just had a special guest join us, the youngest podcast host in Australia. She's being very good. You wouldn't approve a decision like that, would you, darling? No. You're too clever for that.
And she's 10 weeks old.
Wow, 10 weeks. It's time flies, I tell you. And it's that the robbing of that fund to promote what is a political position and to promote the outcomes for a political party is, again, it's a decision that stinks. If you wanted to run those ads, then take it out of a different budget line. It should not have come out of the transition package, because the transition package was meant to support the smooth transition out of the trade and support the farmers and businesses affected. It is not there. That budget allocation does not exist to promote the policy positions of the Labor Party. So yeah, I'd really love to know who did that. If someone wants to DM me privately, if they know the person who made that decision, I will send them a strongly worded email.
I can hear it. I can hear it being written now. So I guess, Gillian, my other question, because you know a lot more on this topic than I do, would be that for our urban listeners, when they hear the smoothing of the transition and they haven't maybe read the budget or had read the plan for this rollout, what exactly is the money supposed to be going towards in rural communities?
So the money is supposed to be going towards things like, and this is where the transition package is not adequate in my opinion. And again, the phase out is far too short. So it's
Mhm.
not well resourced, and it's going to take too short a time. So we are going to see businesses who won't be able to adjust and adapt in time, because it's not a decision that's happening in isolation. We've got all other factors to consider, such as market prices, seasons, all these sorts of things. So some businesses will go to the wall over it, and that is really going to affect the fabric of these rural communities. This money is supposed to be assisting producers. It's supposed to be giving people assistance with their mental health concerns, with support, psychological support, those sorts of things. It's also supposed to be helping them do business plans and how they can adjust their businesses to step out or maintain their mix of production and all these sorts of things. Paying for consultants, and yes, whilst I generally despise consultants, there are some really good rural financial counsellors and rural business consultants out there who actually have farmers in mind. Paying for farmers and other associated businesses to access that type of assistance. One of the things that I'm not really on board with is giving access to funds to prop up meatworks and those sorts of things, so they can expand their kill floors and that sort of thing, so they can take more volume of sheep. So there won't be that sort of, I guess, trying to head off any potential welfare concerns if sheep can't be killed in a timely manner and they can't be fed, so they can be. So there's capacity in the abattoirs, which is a nonsense, because we already don't have capacity in the abattoirs, and it's not for physical space as such. There are some smaller chains around, but it's more to do with the fact that no one wants to work in an abattoir. And even if you can find people who want to work in an abattoir, they generally have to be imported from other areas or from overseas, and they're in regional communities, so there's nowhere for them to live, and there's nowhere for them to eat, and there's nowhere for them to go to the hospital. And if they want to have a family, there's nowhere for their family to go to school. All of these types of things, that throwing money at one single entity is not going to fix this problem. But again, just demonstrates, like we keep banging on about, the people who are making the decisions do not have to live with the consequences of their actions. They can stand up in the media and say, we've been very generous, we've given a lot of money to these farmers to help them step away from this trade, and wipe their hands of it, while the community has to deal with the fallout in the aftermath, where people will suffer, businesses will close, communities will suffer, and our whole industry will suffer because of it.
Absolutely. As part of that transition package, parts of South Australia, as we all know, has been in drought for 2, 3, some of the areas 5 years. So if they've chosen to keep their sheep flock and feed them, is any of that transition fund actually going to go into any of the feed reimbursement to try and keep their herds alive and keep their breeding stock?
As far as I'm aware, the transition package won't be allocated to anybody outside of Western Australia. So I'm quite happy to stand corrected on that. But it is for the
States
Western
mixed up,
Australian
sorry.
industry. But that's all right, because of all the other states in Australia, South Australia is bearing the brunt, I guess, of this decision, because we're well, I wouldn't say close, but there is a road that connects us. And a lot of sheep do come from west to east and enter into our sale yard system, go to our abattoirs. In times when we've had to sell our flock down in South Australia because of drought, we often look to the west to restock, because Australia being the size that it is, they are often not in drought and can afford to sell us excess ewes and that sort of thing. It's a whole intertwined, interconnected industry that doesn't just include sheep. It includes hay, it includes grain, it includes all these other different aspects of agriculture. And so you've got a 4-legged chair, and you're going to kick out one of the legs from it, and then you're left with a 3-legged wobbly chair. And then it only takes one extra factor, be it markets or climate or anything like that, one small thing, and then you've got a 2-legged chair. And what happens to a 2-legged chair? It falls over and takes you with it. So, people making these decisions about what they're going to do, they don't understand the interconnectedness of agriculture in Australia. They don't understand how the ecosystem works, and they can sit in their house and get their groceries delivered or pick them up from the supermarket, because they're very privileged to always have food on the shelves, and not give a thought to where that food comes from, because we are a very lucky country. But without acknowledging the hard work and sheer logistical nightmare it is to get that food on those shelves, it won't stay that way for long.
Yeah, absolutely. If any of our AgFabs who are listening have any additional questions that you want answered, then jump on the social tile for this week's episode and ask Gillian. I might even see if I can pull a specific reel from this section, so you can jump on the reel or on the tile. So Gillian, that takes us to the mid of our episode. And this part of the episode is sponsored by Farm Table. So thank you, Farm Table. Farm Table now hosts our podcast page, our landing page. So I will add that in the show notes below for you all to check out. But welcome to Farm Table. Farm Table is a proud independent Australian agricultural knowledge platform, bringing together the most relevant and curated agricultural resources from around the globe. More than that, Farm Table supports industry collaboration, peer-to-peer networking, and functions to build the capacity of individuals and organisations across the entire Australian ag supply chain. With over 3,000 resources, the latest agricultural events, funding opportunities, grants, micro courses and workshops, all in one location. Farm Table makes it easier to find the information you need.
Mid-episode, one thing I would like to bring up mid-episode, and we could probably touch on this, we could probably do a whole episode about this, but, you know, we're in election mode. People are electioneering, and Labor's come out saying they're the gods and they're going to save everyone from spending too much from going to the doctor. And so then Liberal have come out and said, well, we'll match that. But the problem is, and I have some actual information from an actual doctor, GP, who's affected by this here. The problem with this is that it's just another example of throwing bullshit money at a problem and appearing to be really generous, but not actually getting to the heart of the issue. So I'd really like our listeners to consider, and to, when they're having these discussions, because we all know cost of living sucks. Going to the doctor in Australia should not cost you money. That is why Medicare exists, right? So both major parties are campaigning on a platform of, we're going to make it more affordable for some people, not all, to go to the doctor by doing something to Medicare. But what they're doing is that they are just giving a little bit of money without fixing the root cause of the problem. The problem is that they expect doctors' surgeries to act like a small business, right? And in some areas it works really well, where you've got a lot of people, but in areas, especially rural, regional and remote areas, it does not work, because there isn't the same number of people. So you can't get the same number of rebates back from Medicare from providing that service. So where do you get that money from? So that's where the gap payments and those sorts of things come in, because it costs a lot of money to run a doctor's surgery. It costs a lot of money to be a doctor. And I know it looks like doctors earn a lot of money, but they go into a horrendous amount of debt to get to that point in the first place. So when you're thinking about who you're going to vote for, think about and be a bit proactive. Reach out to your parties, reach out to your local members or your local candidates and say, what are you actually going to do to fix the healthcare nightmare in Australia? It's just increase the actual Medicare rebate. That's all it takes to make these doctor surgeries viable, especially in rural, regional and remote areas. And if you're interested in advocacy on this, reach out to an organisation called RAM, Remote Australians Matter. They've got a website. I'll drop some social tiles for you and links. They're on a Facebook page. They are doing the hard yards on this, because you can't expect people to be able to reach into their pocket for $100 to pay to go to the doctor. Like, otherwise, why does Medicare exist? Okay, and it's another example where us in rural areas are being disadvantaged because there's not enough people to maintain it. Like, the market cannot take care of healthcare in rural, regional and remote Australia, because there's simply not the people. It's the same for childcare, it's the same for healthcare, it's the same for telecommunications. There's simply not enough people for us to pay enough to get the services that we deserve, because we are propping up the rest of the country with what we do. If we all quit tomorrow, if everyone in regional Australia decided to pack up and go home, the country would starve and go naked, and it would have no minerals. It just, so we pay our fair share, so let's look after everyone. And that's sort of my little mid-episode rant, is that firstly, the major political parties aren't fixing the problem. They're trying to, it's like it's the package, the live export package all over again. They're trying to appear very generous to win your vote. And on the other side of that is that Labor has been in power. They could have fixed this if they wanted to, or wait until it's time for an election to throw a little bit of money at it. And I know it seems like, oh, it's such a big dollar figure. It's, it's billions of dollars. Spend the money better and you'll fix the problem. It's not really that hard to fix. But yeah, that's my little mid-episode rant. I know we usually have a little bit of a light banter, but this election, it's really starting to wind me up actually, because it's just, where are our decent options? So, I think it's time, if you live in regional, rural or remote Australia, it's time to just really get angry and start writing letters and start campaigning with your local member. You may not have the opportunity to support an independent, but you have to make everyone know that you are not a safe seat anymore. You need to demand more from your representatives, because they will continue to shit all over us whilst ever they don't have to actually support us. They treat us like doormats, and we can't let that happen anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the finer details for that is Albanese wants private practices to not charge their private fee. Now, that private fee for most GPs and medical services in regional and remote Australia covers the payment of staff, electrical, rent, education, and insurance, because in medical insurance for those practitioners is incredibly high. It is one of the biggest price points. So without the private fee, they're not going to be able to cover those sustainable pricings to be able to stay in regional areas. And they're also not going to be able to, if you can't have someone who's sustainably staying in the area, they can't charge an extra fee to be able to do that. You're not going to have a medical service. They're not going to stay. It is hard enough to get medical staff out to our centres and keep our centres running as it is. So this policy, as good as it might sound in writing and advertising, is an absolute shambles. And again, as Gillian has said, it's not one to get behind. Please talk to your members about it. This was sent through by 2 different general practices who wanted us to cover this on the podcast. So thank you, ladies, for sending that through.
And while we're on that, I'll get up on my high horse one more time. A lot of our regional GPs are ladies. They then have the added burden, the added cost of needing childcare.
Yes.
So they can then provide medical services to the rest of the community. Everything is so expensive, and they may not have access to childcare. So then they have to employ a nanny or a governess, or like not a governess, I wouldn't think so, but like a nanny or a childcare person to look after their kids while they can actually look after the rest of the community. And don't be fooled by people who are going to tell you, oh, doctors are just greedy. They just want to make a lot of money and they're just ripping off the system. Like any large cohort, yes, there are going to be people who are ripping off the system, but that is not the majority. If you had any comprehension of how hard it is to become a regional general practitioner, you would be gobsmacked. The people who do those sorts of things aren't there to rip off Medicare. I can absolutely 100% guarantee you of that. They are driven by passion. They are driven by a desire to help. They are driven by a need to give people access to good health care. They're not there to make a couple of $100,000 off Medicare every year. The sacrifices that they make to get themselves into that position is incredible. I like to think of our rural GPs. I put them right up there with us as in agriculture. It's the same drive, it's the same passion, it's the same desire, it's their identity, it's everything. They're like, without them, we'd be wrecked. Them and rural, anyone who wants to work in healthcare, it's a thankless task. They're not there to rip off the system. So don't let people tell you, oh, they're just trying to game the system and make extra money off the poor working person. That is bullshit. You cannot even begin to imagine how much money it costs to be a doctor and to provide that service if you're not employed by the state. And even if you are employed by the state, it still costs a lot of money to go to uni and stuff. Like,
Mm. Absolutely.
it's
And
not the
before
doctor's
Gillian
problem
gets
to fix.
before Gillian gets too more wound up on that topic, we might jump into something that you and I both predicted, and that is that this week it was released that the Netflix drama Territory, which has been compared to, it's the Australian version of Yellowstone, has not been renewed for another season. And I think we both said this when we reviewed it back in some of our very first episodes that we ran.
Yeah, and in one way, I'm not really surprised, because when you think about it, would have cost a lot of money to make, because of the shooting locations were so remote. There's a lot of people involved, and it would have been a really, and it was very, very popular for a very short amount of time, but it didn't grab audiences the way that I think that they wanted it to. And I think comparing it to Yellowstone probably actually was the nail in its coffin, because it didn't perform like Yellowstone, and it can't, because Australia is a very small niche environment. We're a very small niche country. We don't run around big noting our cracks the same way that the Americans do. So there's not that same sort of charisma around the Australian agricultural industry and cattle industry as there is about the Wild West cowboys of America, because people didn't grow up on stories of Australian agriculture. They grew up on stories of American cowboys and Indians and all that sort of stuff. So it was always pushing shit uphill. I'm glad it was made, and it was made pretty well, but also, not having to suffer through that torture again of watching it, and just like having that little bit of cringe every time. And I know why it happened. I know it's TV and it's not real life, but yeah, I'm not surprised it didn't get renewed.
I might drop the link for that episode where we covered Territory in the show notes, so that if anyone listening wants to go back and have a listen to that and our thoughts and opinions on that, it's an easy to find. Wrapping up our middle session, we have an inquiry. It says, "Hi ladies, looking for some advice about coping with burnout. How do you manage everything? I'm seriously struggling with coping, maintaining the household, looking after myself and my animals, and on top of that, insane work hours every single day." Gillian?
This is an ongoing thing, and I think we need to have a greater discussion around how we manage burnout and the household tasks and all that sort of stuff, because it's quite easy. We could sit here and we could say, oh, plan your day and batch make meals and all this sort of stuff. And technically, yeah, you can do that, but that's still all you doing all the work, and that's putting more of an imposition on you, when the problem is that you already have too many tasks. And depending on your situation, you may be partnered. So, and I know our partners have their own stresses and their own responsibilities, but you both live in that house. So, and if you have kids, you both own those kids. And there's ebbs and flows to everything, because, when you're really busy, your partner may not be so busy, or when they're really busy, you might be a bit more relaxed. And animals is another big thing. Like, we love to collect animals, and sometimes I wonder why we do it to ourselves, because most times they're just a massive pain in the ass. Like, anyone who's ever had potty lambs or potty sheep or potty calves, they take a lot of feeding, they get sick, you got to look after them because they're your responsibility. And, sometimes, and it's, do you harden your heart a little bit and not bring them home? Or, do you just suffer through and just keep feeding them? If you can, stop feeding them with a bottle, get them a bucket feeder that sits on a fence. And once you break them in, because, once they can dump the bucket of milk and walk away, like, if they're too dumb to drink, like, you got to show them how to use it, obviously. But if they're too dumb to drink themselves, then they're probably not going to survive anyway. Which is my sort of broad scale, many animals type attitude coming out. You don't have to agree with it. That's fine. But, sometimes you have to look after yourself. Big gardens are another thing. Like, if you love it and it gives you pleasure and it's what enriches you, then by all means do it. But if you're only doing it because of someone else's expectations, then fuck other people. Who cares? It's your life, it's your house, it's your garden. If it gives you so much stress and pressure and you're not enjoying it, don't do it. Like, who said you have to have a big, massive garden if you live on a farm? Like, I got like 5 yucca plants and a half-dead grapevine. I don't give a shit.
So picture
I'm not a gardener. Like, stop carrying around the weight of other people's expectations of what you should do and what you should be doing. Will probably have a lot to do with your burnout. Like, you don't have to do, like, kids are pretty self-sufficient. If you've got kids, like, you don't have to be finger painting and shit with them. Put them out on the lawn on a tarp, hose them down when they're done, give them non-toxic paint. Who cares? They'll be right. The kids, you don't have to sit there and make beautiful memories, because that's stress that you don't need. You don't need to clean up their stuff. Chuck them outside. They'll be fine. Keep an eye on them, obviously. You don't. When I'm not endorsing like abandoning your children to the wild animals, but stop judging. Stop comparing your life to everyone else's life that you see on social media, because that's not real. And also stop listening to what other people say, maybe at school drop-offs and those sorts of things, because people generally are full of shit. Yeah. They won't tell you if they're struggling because they want to project. They don't want to feel, they like, oh, well, they might be looking at you going, oh, you've already got it so good together. You're handling it really well. I don't want to let them know that I can't handle it. And that might be brave enough to have that conversation. When someone says, how you going? Say, I'm going pretty shit, actually. And this is why. And then they might say, oh, well, actually, I'm going pretty shit too. And it might not fix anything, but at least you're not feeling alone.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can definitely do an entire episode on this. I think it's really important to make sure you're getting enough sleep, because quite often if we're not sleeping enough, if we're not drinking enough, then tasks feel like they're building up, and they may not necessarily be building up. You may be having a fair right crack at it and doing an absolutely brilliant job. But if you have not been hydrated and if you are not getting enough sleep, we can feel more overwhelmed than what the situation demands. So that would be the two aspects that I would look at, and do 10-minute resets. And whether that is a mental reset where you just sit down for 10 minutes and have a cup of tea, put your phone away, just have 10 minutes with your cup of tea. A nice warm beverage does an incredible thing. 10 minutes in something you enjoy. If you love walking your animals, if you just like sitting in your chook pen and watching your chooks, do that for 10 minutes. 10 minutes isn't going to detract a huge amount from your day. Set an alarm on your phone. Okay, I'm not very good at this. I've got to get better at it. My alarm is going to go off at 10 o'clock. And that is my indication to start getting ready for bed, and I need to be in bed by 10:30. Again, just a suggestion, because I know I'm not very good at it, but it would make a world of difference if I could be in bed and asleep, before 11. That would be fantastic. I know that would contribute greatly to other people's mental health. I've got kids and newborns who don't sleep through the night, so that's where my imbalance comes in a little bit at the moment. So sleep, hydration, doing something for 10 minutes every now and again throughout your day that you enjoy. And I think we can probably leave it at that for the moment, because we can probably come back and do an entire episode.
I think we could. And so if you've got any hints and tips on how you manage burnout, drop them in the chat when we post these episodes, because, sharing is caring. It may not be that, we're not stupid. We know how to run our own lives, but sometimes you just get so bogged down you can't see the forest for the trees. And someone might make a suggestion and you might just go, oh my God, I never thought of that, because I've been too busy worrying about how I'm going to do everything else. I haven't considered that. So don't be afraid or ashamed to share what works for you. It might seem unconventional, but if it works for you, great.
I think one of the biggest, most popular reels that I shared on my social media last year was me taking the washing off the line. Doesn't sound like a very appealing video, but what I shared in the captions was, when I do a big wash day, I take 5 baskets out to the washing line. One is for the kids, one is for Ned and I, one is for towels, sheets, whatever it is. Allocate them like that. So at least if I'm not getting to sorting the clothes, they're in a basket where it needs to be, whether it's in Ned's and my room, whether it's in the kids' room, whether it's, sitting in front of the laundry hall cupboard to put away. It's where it needs to be. Whether I get to it or not, it's been washed, it's been folded, and it's where it's supposed to be. So even if we're just taking steps like that, one of my things that I need to do more regularly is I'm not going to put any more washing through the machine if I don't have a basket. And I've got to put that washing away before I have a basket. So that's another mindset that you can do if it's something like a household task, like washing that's building up. It's okay if you wash once a week, and that's the method you want to use. It's okay if you want to do one load a night and get it washed, get it dried, whether that's through a dryer or whether that's hanging it up. I'm not a person who hangs up washing during the day. I will wash it during the day and I will hang it up after the kids go to sleep at night. So yes, I'm at the clothesline at 9 o'clock and it's dark, but I'm by myself. I'm taking my 10 minutes. I'm matching it with a job that doesn't take much brain power and it's still getting done. In summer here, it'll dry overnight. It doesn't need the sun. It just needs the heat.
Yeah. The washing's an interesting one because I think that's where we often feel really overwhelmed. And I've just recently, my youngest is now tall enough to reach the clothesline if she stands on a chair. So she has started hanging out the washing and bringing it back in. And I think part of what contributes to our burnout is we set our standards too high for when other people take jobs off our shoulders and do a task on our behalf. So if you are getting your kids to fold the washing and hang it out and that sort of stuff, you can't expect them to be perfect at it. One, because they're children, and two, because, you know, it's the first time they've done it. They don't have 20 years experience of folding and washing exactly the way mum likes it. So just, if it fits in the drawer or the cupboard where it belongs, stick it in there and shut the door. Like, it's done. Job's done. Move on to something else. It's not worth fretting over. I can guarantee you, if I ever came to your house, washing is the last thing I'm going to judge you over. If you give me green tea, if you give me anything that is like yucky vegan crap, like oat milk, like that's, if you give me a cup of green tea, if you say, can you want a cup of tea, and it's not like, if it's some fancy floral blend, I'm like, what's going on here? You know, something wrong with this person. But you know, I'm not going to judge you on the condition of your house, because my house is a nightmare. I put all my shit that I don't have a home for in a plastic crate, and it sits on the floor of my lounge room. Looking for a cordless drill, it's probably in that crate. Masking tape would be in that box somewhere.
Kids' rock collection is going to be in the bottom of that box.
Rocks. Oh, rocks. Oh my God. I could just make a whole pavement with the amount of rocks in my house. It's ridiculous. But yeah. Just don't stop worrying about other people judging you, because I will guarantee you we're all in the same situation.
I definitely feel like we need to continue this conversation in another episode where it's got a segment just for itself. So let's jump into Landcare. So Landcare groups are being so tightly controlled to their detriment. So this was sent in by someone who has tried to attend their own Landcare group. It is controlled. Their description is for old white males, to the point where the funding is not being applied for, it is not being distributed, and they are no longer hosting meetings because it's too hard and they're too busy. But they're not letting a new committee come on and take on the Landcare, because the money that is in their fund was applied for by them for projects that they might still want to do in the future.
It's a very, very, very familiar story, and it's not unique to Landcare. It's any community organization that gives power to a small group of people and it makes them feel important, and they get to, like, say, I'm the chair of this, or I'm on this committee and we're doing this, and they get their names in the paper and all those sorts of things. And like so many other things in agriculture, it comes down to a lack of succession planning. Because when you take on a role, and I can say this wholeheartedly because I have a plan and a strategy. When you take on the role of being on a committee or being the chair of something, you need to have an exit strategy. You can't just plan to sit there for 20 years if you have the best interests of that organisation in mind. Because I'll guarantee you, it doesn't matter where it is or what it is, you sitting in that role for 20 years is not the best thing for that organisation. Because in 20 years' time, your knowledge and your experience won't be relevant anymore.
No.
It's And and the government, I think, has, especially with Landcare, they have a responsibility here because that is government money. They should be making sure that those organisations are functioning properly. And so that's really poor governance and really poor management of those organisations. And it's to the detriment of the entire community. Landcare does a power of work. When it was first set up, it was set up by farmers originally who wanted to improve the environment. And, you know, like any of these other sorts of things, they now become little cliques, and you can't join unless you're one of the cool kids. And so you might have a heap of passion and experience and knowledge, but you're not allowed to be a part of it because you're a threat. And it's to the detriment of the entire community.
Or
So
heaven
if you are,
forbid you have your own ideas. You have your
oh,
own
heaven
ideas,
forbid.
Gillian, and you think, well, yes, you know, that is for putting in tree lanes. So let's put in tree lanes. But, you know, someone else who may have a committee position, well, they've already got a tree lane, so they don't want to spend it on tree lanes. But it's for your community, it is for your area, and it is for the projects that it's been applied for. And I am surprised that there's not an auditing body that goes around and looks at Landcare groups, not suggesting they start doing this, but, you know, okay, you were granted this amount of money in this year to spend during this time period for this project. Why is it still sitting in your bank account?
Yeah, why haven't you met your deliverables? There's very little accountability. There's very little governance, and I've found in these organisations very little governance training. So people get appointed as chairs, and they're on these committees and those sorts of things, and they actually have a really high standard of which they're meant to adhere to. But because, you know, and ignorance is no defence against the law, but because it's like, oh, well, I'm the chair of this, so it must be just like being the chair of the local footy club or something. They don't take it seriously enough, and it becomes like little kingdoms, and they're like, well, my word is law, and you know, that's not, you can't run an organization like that, especially when you're looking after, this is my biggest thing, when you're looking after someone else's money on behalf of the community, you owe it to everyone else to do the best you can possibly do. And setting yourself up in a little kingdom and yourself as a little king or queen is not it.
No, absolutely not. If you are wanting to be on a committee, if you are wanting to get involved in Landcare, for my understanding, please do your due diligence and double check me on this. You only need 3 committee members. You need a president, a vice president, no, a president, a secretary, and a treasurer. Once you have 3 positions, you can create your own Landcare group. Landcare groups are only ever designed to be little. So even if you have like a like a little town or a little district within your area, if the group, because I'm assuming that the person who submitted this wants some problem solving. So, okay, you've got a major city, Dubbo. You don't have to be part of the Dubbo Landcare group. You could go out to the little towns. If the little towns are having similar issues on their boards, then you can go into sub-districts. So is there a major property that's near you that has enough land that may be able to qualify, or is there a district that used to be there that's still on Google Maps that doesn't have a township anymore? Maybe you can make a Landcare group using their geographical location. You can make a group yourself, or you can get a governance body involved and get them to push out some of the committee members. That last one is probably not recommended, because if you're trying to live in that district, you don't necessarily want to make enemies within that district or upset people. But there are other ways around it. If you have kids, there is now a junior Landcare group that you can start for your kids, and they can help you do those projects. There's less funding available, but it's the same thing. You only need 3 position holders, and I think it's 5 members, and you can start running the junior Landcare group for your area. So if your area doesn't have a junior Landcare group, I would maybe start with looking at that rather than trying to tip over the hierarchy of the Landcare group that's already predetermined and established that you're having issues with.
And do yourself a favour, if you are going to establish a committee or a group or anything like that, there's a website called ourcommunity.org.au, and they have a lot of fact sheets and stuff on there about how to form a committee, the roles of the different office bearers and those sorts of things, and simple governance rules and that sort of stuff. And I'm pretty sure Landcare, if it's doing its job right, should have the same information, but it always doesn't hurt to educate yourself about how things should happen. Because, you know, we come at these things with different life experiences and that sort of stuff. You may have been on the PNF, you may have seen your parents serve on committees and that sort of thing. But the governance landscape and stuff has changed significantly. Even in the past 5 years, it's not the same as it once was. You've got a lot more responsibilities, and expectations are different. As the community becomes more educated around what good governance looks like, they will have higher expectations of you. So by all means, get stuck in and make change, but be very, very careful that you're not just building yourself a little kingdom to be a little king, so, or queen. Gender neutral, all encompassing. So just be really, really mindful of that, because I've done it myself in the past. It's really easy to do. You think, I'm the only person who can fix this problem and I know exactly what I'm doing, so I'm going to do this, and everyone else can get fucked. But that's not very good for the long-term sustainability and community cohesiveness. I've learnt my lessons the hard way. In some cases I still tell people to get fucked and do what I like. But, you know, save that for special occasions. But yeah, do your job properly, and it's a lot easier, because then if you do come under criticism, because you probably will if you're trying to make change, if you're trying to upset the perceived order of things and you're challenging the other people in the community, people will criticize you and say you're doing it wrong. You've got to be able to say, well, actually, I can tell you for a fact I'm doing it the right way, and you'll just sleep better at night.
Yeah, arm yourself with education. Absolutely, double check everything. So I hope that answers everyone's questions. Thank you so much for everyone for suggesting today's topics. Please keep those coming through. We are on all social media platforms, and we are also on YouTube and all major podcasting platforms. Please give us a like and review where you are watching us. We'd love 5 stars. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to pick an AgFab of the week next week. So please engage with us, and we will get back to you all very, very soon. Have a great week.
Bye.